Hello everybody, Tracy Sizemore here. RPG a Day 2018, day 11. And the question today, today's question I'm going to just answer real quick because there's not really much to say about it. And I thought I'd throw in an alternate question too. So, the question today is Wildest Character Name. This is for the weekends. We do something off the track there. So Wildest Character Name. I had to rack my brain because I don't really come up with too many wild character names. Most of my characters are fairly well grounded in terms of trying to make them vaguely realistic as human beings, because generally I play humans. Almost all the time I play humans. So my wildest character name is a fantasy character. I play it in a friend's fantasy game, and her name was Shalestra. Shalestra. Now, you have to have the hand movements along with that. Shalestra was a human in a fantasy setting, and she was a magic user, sort of a natural nature mage. And but she was also pretty agile. But what made her Shalestra was, just her personality, meaning that she was used to the finer things, and she was a talker, and so she would convince people to give her things. And so she would be the one who would stay late at night sleep in late in the tavern before we decided to go off outside of the town to adventure. I mean, she would take her time and, wander down the stairs, get some breakfast, later, and then expect when we did go to a town, she would find somebody to convince to give her a warm room for the night. She would just do that. That was Shalestra, and that was the wildest character name that I could come up with. So I'm going to leave that there because that's all there is, really. But I thought I would explore an alternate question, just, for fun. And that is, how do you prepare for a one-shot? Now, my friends know how meticulous I am about preparing for one-shots. I feel like campaigns and one-shots are completely different animals, and they each bring their own challenges, and one is not inherently more challenging than the other. Both are equally challenging. And so I'm pretty picky about the games that I write for one-shots, because I want to have fun running those games, and I want to engage with those games just as much as I hope my players will. So I tend to take my time and come up with concepts that feel good to me. And what I mean by that is that they incorporate all the important levers and dials that I need in order to have fun running a one-shot game. And some of those dials and levers include a fun concept, meaning that I want to create a game that's fun, first and foremost. Action-oriented, or has a good pace, meaning we're not going to slog through it, or it has it's just basic 4 hours of we're going somewhere, and it's going to be a roller coaster of fun while we get there. That's number one. Number two, I want to have some sort of, and I think I've mentioned this before in previous RPG days last year, is that I want to have an underlying current of emotional engagement somehow. Doesn't mean you have to engage with that. In fact, you could stay above the surface and have fun and have your roller coaster and get through your 4-hour session and be satisfied because it was well paced, it was interesting, and it was exciting, and you got to do cool things, and yay, by the end you're done and 4 hours have gone by and you're feeling good. But if you want to, there's an underneath for almost all the one-shots that I write. Underneath there's some sort of deeper connection, somehow, somewhere. It's a guarantee for almost all one-shots that I run and run for cons and write. I write almost all of the ones I run. So that's what I tend to incorporate in my one-shots. And so how I prepare for those is I start writing stream of consciousness in Word. You know, I come up with my idea, and whether it's a campaign or a one-shot, almost always my idea is heavily based in the characters the PCs will encounter. So I create NPCs first and create their motivation for why they want to do things, who they are, what kind of people they are, because that's the most interesting part of role-playing to me, is characters. It's the most interesting part of life to me, is people, as I've said before. So it stands to reason that my process in creating games starts and ends with characters. So when I create a one-shot, I start by defining who the NPCs are, what they are trying to do, why they are trying to do it, and to make them deeper than just a 2D paper doll cutout. Doesn't mean that there has to be complex motivation for every character, but it means that there has to be some kind of realistic representation of who that character is, so that the PCs can interact with it, so that the world can feel more real. And to me that's important. So I start with characters and I create motivations for what they want to do, and then that feeds what the adventure is going to be. Now that's true of both one-shots and campaigns, for me, for anything that I write. Almost anything that I write. There are exceptions if I'm writing for somebody else. So if I'm writing for for money or for a game system, I may break that rule a little and start from a place of action rather than motivation. But if I'm writing for myself, I will almost invariably start with NPCs and move from there, and just sort of use that as a jumping off point and doing thought experiments about what, if they're like this, what do they want? If they want this, what do they do? If they do this, what will happen? And then inject what the PCs might do, and then you have an adventure. And not only do you have an adventure that you know your NPC is super, super good. So if the PCs go off the track, and they inevitably will, of course, you know your NPCs well enough to know how they'll react to the PCs going off the track. And that makes GMing more fun for me, because I'm not left completely unsure about what to do when players do things that I didn't expect. I'm left with a much better idea of what to do, because I know the motivations and personalities of the characters that inhabit the world. Part of the other thing, so I just write stream of consciousness. Okay, here's what they do, here's who they are, here's what they want, here's what they do, and here's the result of that. Then interject the PCs and how they might disrupt those things. From there, I also try to anticipate big beats of what the PCs might do to disrupt those things. Anticipating what PCs might do. Now part of that, and this is really important for one-shots, campaigns I don't do this, obviously. And what I'm talking about is creating pre-generated characters that fit with the adventure. In one-shots, I feel like that's as much a part of the adventure as the adventure itself, is the pre-generated characters. Because you're creating characters that are custom built to interface with that adventure. If you have a pre-generated character in your adventure that has boating, for example, and they're never ever going to use boating in your adventure, why do they have boating? Now, that may be the way it is because you've decided, okay, I'm going to use these archetypes that the designer has provided and just throw them out there for players to use in this adventure that you've created. I prefer not to do that. I prefer to create characters specifically for that adventure, both in terms of the mechanics of the skills that they need and, you know, giving them each a way to shine mechanically. Like, this is the person who's really good at persuasion, and this is the person who's really good at fighting, and this is the person who's really good at investigation or survival or whatever else you might need. But also in terms of personality. So creating PCs that have, I used to create like empty shell PCs that just have a basic concept and the skills. Now I tend not to do that these days. I tend to create more specific people. There's merits for each way of doing that. I mean, I think that it's fine to create archetypes and customize them for the adventure. That's great. I think I prefer, and in my experience over the years, I feel like I've moved into, I don't want just an archetype, I want a specific person. I don't want just a cheerleader, I want Kaylee, who has these particular characteristics and this particular way of dealing with the world, and she does it, I mean, her personality is this, rather than a generic cheerleader who might have specific stats, but I leave then the player to fill in the personality of who they are. Both work, like I say, but I've tended to opt more for the specific rather than the general as time has gone on. And like I say, whether you do general archetypes or specific people with backgrounds, and I mean, you don't want too much of a background, but something that gives their personality who they are and maybe their connections with one or two of the other PCs. Whether you do one or the other, either way, the creation of those pre-generated characters and the interface between them, I feel, is just as important as the adventure you're putting them into. Just as critical to the experience as the things they are going to do. They have to be integrated, married, at least when I do it. Some people may feel differently, but that's the way I do it, and almost everything that I do in preparing for a one-shot is motivated from the sense of giving my players a good time, meaning giving them enough to go on that they don't have to rack their brains and come up with a whole bunch of stuff themselves if they don't want to, because you only have 4 hours. I want to get to the role-playing, the fun, as soon as possible, so I'm going to give them what they need in order to play that character as fast as possible. And the more you give them to actually figure out themselves, the more awkward it's going to be for longer. And it might take you a little longer to get to that fun part where we're all together and having that magical moment of we are playing this game together and everybody feels comfortable and we're having fun. That first half hour or so of a one-shot game can be very awkward, and I try to do my best to create the things that I need to create and do the tricks that I need to do to minimize that period of awkwardness in a 4-hour one-shot game. And part of that is creating creating pre-generated characters that fit with the adventure you're going to run. I believe. I could be wrong. Never say never. There's always exceptions to the rules, but that's kind of how I operate. I'm trying to think what else, but that covers most of it. I love to run one-shots many times because the more comfortable I am with that adventure and the characters within it, the more fun I'm going to have as a GM running it. So just running it once, while some people might run something once and be done with it, I write in order to sustain my interest to run it many times with many different people and many different groups, because I enjoy bringing different people through the same adventure, especially because it makes me feel comfortable and I have fun giving and tweaking those adventures to get them just right for people to have fun with me. You know, that's my motivation. So my motivation is not to necessarily come up with something new every time. I enjoy tweaking and refining until I've got something that I feel like, this is fun and great the way it is. And that takes time. Anyway, that's my answer to how do I create a one-shot. It's, I think, one of the most challenging things to do in gaming is to create a 4-hour game that integrates everything that you want to integrate. A way to have the PCs or players have fun, a way for you to have fun, and a way to integrate those things that you might want to integrate that help you have fun and to help you give meaning to the game. You know, that's another kind of thing that I look for is not just having fun, but I don't know, coming away with some kind of human connection somehow. It's ambitious. It's hard to do, but that's what I do. Okay, that's it for today. I will talk to you all tomorrow.